I'm going to be delighted to introduce Mike Fuerstman, who's a partner at Rhapsody Venture Partners, which is a hard tech-focused venture capital firm in Cambridge. Mike evaluates new potential investments for the fund and manages Rhapsody's engagement with a broad network of large institutional or industrial companies. He's worked as a management consultant at McKinsey & Company, and then led business development for NanoTerra, a product co-development startup spun out by Professor Whiteside's research group. So it's give us a warm welcome for Mike.
All right, this thing's working. Good. Thanks, everybody. Really glad to be here today. Thank you for the invitation to the NAI and Steve and Randy. Very exciting opportunity to talk to a room full and a Zoom full of entrepreneurs and inventors. You guys are the lifeblood of our work as venture capitalists. You are the people who, for the reason why we exist. And so it's always wonderful to speak to people who are aspiring to bring new technologies to market and into the world. Let me start by getting this to do what it's supposed to do. Let's see. No, I'm pressing the wrong button. It's all good. That's why. So a little bit about Rhapsody Venture Partners. We're a venture capital firm. We invest in startups in the hard tech space, which I'll define for you in a moment. About $200 million under management. That's all the assets that we've invested to date in a series of funds, mainly seed stage. So it's really the kinds of folks like yourselves who are looking to grow a new company. Those are the people who we're typically talking to. We're following the journey of these companies, and we've learned a lot along the way about how you ought to maybe think about commercializing your inventions. When I say hard tech, it is a very broad spectrum. It's anything that uses sort of engineering or applied science at its core that is not human health related. So other Mike will, actually probably better Mike, will tell you about that side of things. And it's a different world. MedTech has a much more well-defined playbook on how you do startups and what your go-to-market looks like and how you get acquired or IPO. Hard tech is a lot fuzzier and a lot more challenging, I think, in some ways to sort of navigate that path to success, whatever that means for you. So what I want to do today is a couple of things, give you frameworks for, I guess, the reason why we're all here, to try to decide whether to commercialize your hard tech invention. I'm going to focus really on hard tech. And then I think I want to go a little bit of a step further than that, which is to help you to figure out how best to pursue your goal. So if you ask the questions that I will talk about, should you commercialize your invention, and you say yes, there's still a question about what the best way to do that is, and your tech transfer office is very well familiarized with those different paths. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So you have an invention, right? I'm a PhD chemical physics person out of the Whiteside's lab at Harvard. So we came up with billions of inventions, I don't know, many inventions, and most ended up kind of on the desk of someone at Harvard OTD, and were never licensed out to a startup or to a big company. And that's okay. Things I did generated IP that ended up ultimately laying fallow. That's because it really wasn't going to immediately be applicable to any real world problem. And it's true that when you're a research scientist and you come up with something cool, you think it's going to change the world, or at least you hope it will. And so that's kind of your bias is this is going to be amazing. I'm sure Steve, as a former industrial chemist or material scientist, came up with lots of really cool innovations, commercialized 3, which is an exceptional number for somebody in industry. That is not easy to do. So you're always kind of thinking towards, this thing I have is really cool, and it's going to be do something out in the world. The reality is, it's not so straightforward. And so you have to ask yourself the question of, what is this thing that I've developed? What can it be useful for? Spoiler alert, you probably don't know the answer to that right now. That's why you have to talk to people. let's say you've figured out that your technology can meet a particular need. You have to ask yourself the question of, should this be commercialized? And these are distinct questions, so we'll talk a little bit through that. And then number three, if you decide, hey, I really do want to commercialize this innovation, what are the different sort of ways of doing that, and how should you think about that question? So a lot of content. I'm going to sprinkle it with some stories as well, and hopefully this will be helpful for you. First thing I want to say is, how do you find the answer to these questions, right? If you are a PhD scientist or postdoc or a professor, you may not know how to get started. You have a technology that can impact a market. You may not even know what market it is or what industry. Talking to people is the answer, and it's not always straightforward and easy to do. But the good news is there's a lot of people out there who will talk to you as a graduate student or a postdoc or a professor. Starts with your tech transfer office. They have industrial connections. They've spent many years doing this sort of thing, figuring out where technologies are useful. They're great people to talk to. First, they'll also help you to know what you're supposed to patent before you talk to anyone. So it's very important to speak to them first. And then they're also there are programs that will help you to take that step. So if you create a startup, or even if you're thinking about it, you can do NSF, the National Science Foundation's I-Corps program, which I guess is still a thing. It's hard to know right now. But it's a wonderful program. They pay you a stipend on the condition that you talk to 100 people in various industries and in the value chains that you're targeting. You target the people that you might be buying from, the people you're selling to, your competitors. You're just learning as much as you can about the spaces that you think your technology can fit into, solely so that you can answer the question of, is this a good thing to commercialize? Does it make sense? Am I thinking about the right strategy? Those are wonderful programs. Activate is another program in worldwide or nationwide, and it's big in Boston. Activate will also give you a lot of insights onto how you can commercialize. Just reach out to people on LinkedIn. Actually really works, especially if you give them a message about why you're reaching out first, so that they understand, hey, here's an inventor who has a cool technology they want to talk to me about, whether it's useful. Don't be afraid to do that. You can also get in touch with VCs and angel investors. Harder to find, but you can find us in LinkedIn as well. And we're usually willing to chat with you about the things that we know in the industries that we know well. So talk to people. Probably one of the most important points that you can take from my talk. But start with the question of, what is your technology good for? So the important thing here is you have to ask yourself the question, does your technology address a real problem that someone actually has today or is likely to have in the near future? And I will say that there is a big circle around likely to have in the near future, because you can envision a future very easily that doesn't actually manifest. And maybe you spend a whole lot of time and money and years of your life trying to develop something for a future that doesn't come to pass. And we'll talk a little bit about examples of that. So you have to kind of be sober about your assessment of really whether your technology will address that challenge. Other important thing to ask is, what are the other ways of solving that problem? So you could be trying to develop a solution to a problem, and meanwhile, other technologies are being developed at the same time that will really obviate the need for your thing that you're developing. So long duration storage, right? For energy, from renewables and things like that. If you started that journey 5 or 10 years ago doing something really out of the box and you think it could really work well, lithium ion batteries have been getting a lot cheaper since then, and they can do a lot. I mean, they can't go, 10 hours of storage, but they can do a lot in terms of storing energy. And if you're doing something that's sort of shorter duration storage, it's going to be tough to beat those because now they're cheaper. So think about, what are the other ways of solving the problem? Is your thing really going to win in a differentiated way? What are your target markets and industries? And most importantly, who's going to pay you for your product if you bring it to market? So it's a really important question. Sometimes it's tough to figure out who's actually going to be the one who's going to pay you for the thing that you have invented. I mean, from a customer standpoint, not necessarily an acquisition standpoint. So these are important questions. You have to ask them, and you have to try to get the answers as clearly as you can. Here's a good example of something that kind of missed the mark in that regard, and not by its own fault. I'm going to have specific examples of companies in the future, but this was such a big thing. A lot of technologies were developed for LiDAR. So LiDAR is a laser-based scanning system that basically generates a point cloud in front of, for example, a vehicle that's driving down the road, so the vehicle can figure out what's going on in front of it. It is the thing that powers Waymo, right? So if you've been to the Bay Area and you've seen autonomous taxis that have also been mapping Boston recently, and like good luck with Boston in the wintertime and your LiDAR system. But these are like being used in vehicles that are so freaking expensive that you have to use them as cabs in order to like amortize the cost of this LiDAR system. So for a long time, people were working on better LiDAR, cheaper LiDAR, ways of generating material information. So like you can actually figure out what materials things are made of from your LiDAR. Those are awesome inventions. The problem is it never got cheaper enough. The whole system, the integrated system never got cheap enough to be used in passenger vehicles, which is where the volume is. So everyone thought that L4, L5, or like your car drives itself, like a Waymo taxi. People thought that was coming just down the pike, right? Within 5-10 years, we'd have that everywhere, and hasn't gotten to that point yet because people haven't solved the problem of getting it cheap enough. And maybe the demand isn't quite there either. So lots of startups, lots of funding, even some of them that went public around LiDAR technology. Great technology, just it hasn't really come to fruition yet in the automobile industry. There are other applications of LiDAR, industrial sensing and things like that, that are actually used, but not as widely as you would have gotten in automotive to the point where you would get successful exits from for your company. So if you decide, I have a technology that's going to solve a problem today, or one that's likely to exist in the near future, and it's differentiated from other stuff, and it's going to win this battle, I want to try to commercialize it. Well, the next question is, should you commercialize it, right? You found the need, but I think an important thing in our world, in this sort of hard tech space, that people don't think about is what are my techno-economics like? So if I were to produce this product at scale, what would it cost me to produce that product? What would it cost me to distribute it? What would my profitability look like versus competing technologies? And can they shrink their margins to compete with me on price and like drive me out of the market before I even get going? There's a lot of really important stuff here that's really hard to get at ab initio. If you're a grad student, a postdoc, a professor, you don't understand the industries, it is hard to understand what do my techno-economics look like. I guarantee you at DuPont, you guys were thinking very carefully about what are my margins going to be like when I scale this thing up. Fortunately, DuPont has an army of chemical engineers who know how to do techno-economic analysis. Professors, graduate students don't always have access to that. So it is important to try to think through, if I scale up, what do my input costs look like? What does my energy costs look like? Like, how efficient can my processes be really? If you're doing chemical synthesis, if you're doing, even if you're doing like electronic component systems, you can figure out how much do my component costs? What do they look like? If you have to tape out a board, that's an expensive process, and doing that at scale is not easy because there aren't so many foundries with space. So you have to really be sober in your assessment of whether your techno-economics makes sense. If you're like on the fence and there's big error bars around these things and you think it's worth making a go of it, you absolutely should. I encourage you, not to be daunted by the answers here, but by all means, like, please let this guide you a bit in your determination of whether it makes sense to go forward with your on your journey. If you have an answer that says, hey, I'm going to make this product, but it's going to cost 3 times as much as what already exists in the market, even if it's a bit better, it's going to be tough to sell it to customers. So something to think about. And so an example here that I have for you is Zymergen, and Zymergen is kind of a stand-in for lots of things in the sort of industrial biotech space. So in the pharma space, industrial biotech has been around for a long time, or pharmaceutical biotech, making drugs. You use bacteria, you genetically modify them, you get them to make the active that you want, and you sell it for a lot of money per kilo. And that's great because it costs quite a bit of money per kilo to produce. There are big companies like Zymergen that try to apply the same thinking to industrial materials. They tried to make hyalin, which was a polyimide film, which you could use for display and electronics, and they just couldn't make the economics work. They raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They even IPO'd and never could get to the point where they could bring it to market because they couldn't produce it reliably and certainly not at cost. Ultimately, they were bought parts by Ginkgo, which is a whole other story. It basically, you have to think through the really carefully, like, yeah, it's really cool that I can make this stuff with a bug, but should I make it with a bug? Like, what's the advantage? And what does it get me? And so very important to think through that kind of question. So if you answer the question, yes, I should commercialize this technology, then the question is how? And there are many different ways you can go about this, but two, I think, very common ones are create a startup, which is our world. We fund startups, or try to license the technology out through the TLO. Easier said than done to out-license technologies, certainly, but there are wildly successful success stories. So for example, I did my PhD at Harvard Chemistry. We have a professor there, Roy Gordon, who in the 70s and 80s developed the chemical vapor deposition process that is used to put all of the low emissivity coatings on all office glass ever in the world. And you can imagine when Harvard licensed that out, if you're the inventor and you get, I don't know, a penny per whatever, it adds up pretty well. So the students who developed that, the professor, the university, everyone did quite well on that out license. Of course, again, easier said than done. The numbers aren't terrific on making sort of getting a profitable outcome, but it can make more sense than creating a startup around it. And it kind of depends on how much you're willing to put in of yourself. Creating a startup as a founder and inventor, you have to go real hard into something that isn't always immediately lucrative, isn't always easy to raise funding on. You might be eating ramen for a continued period of time until you're able to get past those initial milestones and get something to market. But also you need to make sure the opportunity is big enough to sustain a company, because you're going to be like trying to get people to believe your vision and put money into your company. So you have to be going after a big thing, and you have to be able to tell a big story, and you have to be comfortable with a tremendous amount of risk. The reality of startups is that most of them fail. And you have to be willing to try to make a go of it to get to success. And you have to be willing to fail, which is not a bad thing, by the way. One of the wonderful things about the United States and what differentiates us and our innovation culture from a lot of the rest of the world is that we celebrate failure, actually, especially in the Bay Area. There's really a culture around, hey, your startup failed? Cool, whatever. What'd you learn? Let's go do another one. So important. Out-licensing technology, you're kind of giving up a lot of the control. You're saying, this is an invention I made. I'm going to put it in the capable hands of corporation X and let them go for it, and they might not get it to market, and you kind of have to be okay with it. But it's an option for you to do. So I have a few minutes left. Let me tell you about one of our portfolio companies, SafiTech. Really, really cool technology. So a little bit of background. If you know about microelectronics, you connect components to the circuit board by using solder. And solder traditionally was made using lead because it has relatively low melting points, so you can melt it like with not a lot of heat. Of course, lead we know is not great, toxic. So it was replaced by other materials like Sac305, that's tin, silver, copper in some combination. It has a low-ish melting point, but still kind of high. And so you'd love to be able to process solders like that at lower temperatures so that you don't do damage to your components or that you don't do damage to flexible substrates. SafiTech came up with a really cool technology. You take you take solid metal, you heat it up above the melting point, you put it in a solvent, you vortex the heck out of it, basically, stick it in a blender, cool it down, and you get the formation of a solid metal shell around a liquid metal core. And because that solid metal shell is like atomically smooth, you don't actually get precipitation of solidification inside the particles until you're well below the normal melting point of that material. So bottom line is you can take Sac305 and you can process it at 150 C instead of 220 C, which is a big deal. Really cool technology, could change the world. We funded the company and they were developing the technology. And then we all realized together that it's actually a really complex process to get a new solder material into the market, especially if you need to kind of process it differently than what's currently being done. And these guys just didn't have the experience, the expertise. They were in Ames, Iowa. They didn't have the people there who could solve those problems, and they definitely didn't have the heft of their brand name right with customers. So We ended up, the company got acquired by Indium, which is a big solder company. But when I say acquired, I mean like not for like gargantuan sums of money, more for kind of royalties. It's almost like a licensing deal. Like there's royalties involved if they get it to market. So I think it's going to end up to be a good ending to this story. But the reality is the technology needed the heft of that big company in order to get the product to market, not just the heft, but the expertise and the capabilities. Just real quick, to this slide is probably better shared than shown because there's a lot of content on it. But like your funding journey for a startup, if you do decide to start up a company, is complicated, and you have lots of different options, from non-dilutive government grants that can get you a fair bit of the way, to corporate partnerships and joint development agreements, to dilutive funding from VCs or angel investors. And then ultimately, as you get later stage, you can get funding from banks and stuff that's also non-dilutive. The thing to keep in mind here that I wanted to just very briefly cover is getting money from venture capital is kind of expensive. You're selling a piece of your company. And that actually has meaningful it has meaningful implications for you as the founder and what you're going to get in terms of return if the company exits, if it's acquired, if it IPOs or something like that. You'll also have different pressures about how big you need to scale your company and how fast. So you can talk to me offline if you need to know more, but there are very good reasons to raise money from venture capital, especially venture capitalists like ourselves who actually help to play an active role in the company and try to connect you with the right customers and things like that. And you're getting more than just money. But there's also good reasons to think about going a different way if maybe your market opportunity is pretty niche. Then there are other ways to think about that. One other thing I wanted to mention just really quickly, when you're talking to companies, when you're commercializing your technology, make sure you talk to your customers. Make sure you talk to your suppliers. Make sure you talk to other companies in your value chain at your position that might actually be interested in helping you to get to market, distribute your product, get to customers. It is remarkably challenging to commercialize a technology in the industrial sector, just because customers like want to know who their suppliers are. They want to know they can trust them. They want to know they're going to be there 3 years from now. They might want dual supply and have it be manufactured in multiple places. So don't be afraid to talk to your customers, your kind of even competition in a way, and your suppliers, because that will ultimately help your path to market. So I'm out of time, but I wanted to just give you one other tale, story about a company, very, very well-known company, a startup in the area, QD Vision, really successful company. If you have a Samsung QLED television, it uses this technology. It came out of Munshi Biwendi's lab, Nobel laureate, fantastic quantum dot technology. They raised $80 million, which today doesn't sound actually like all that much to get a display technology to market. Challenge for them was that their only customer was Samsung. Back then, there were really two companies you could work with, Samsung and LG. LG went one way, they went to OLEDs, Samsung did QLEDs, and ultimately, they had one customer. So the customer was able to kind of control what happened with their company and ended up buying them for $70 million. They raised $80 million, they were acquired for $70 million. There's a fun thing you'll learn about if you raise venture capital called preference stacks. So the venture capitalists, I think, I don't know, have the inside baseball on how all the waterfall ended up, but I can pretty much say with reasonable certainty that the VCs probably walked away with most of that money. Probably just from the standpoint of understanding how these things tend to work. So they couldn't have done it any other way. They needed to raise a bunch of money to make a display technology, and it got commercialized. It's in a bunch of TVs, and that is awesome. But you should think about for yourself, if you commercialize, hey, what is my target market? What does this look like? How do I get to market? What does the exit look like? Who's likely to buy me and for how much? So you can talk to VCs about that. You can talk to angels. Talk to your tech transfer office. These are all important questions. That was a heck of a lot of information. I'm happy to chat about it later. Sorry I went over by a few minutes. Hope it was a useful thing for folks to hear. So.
Thank you, Mike. That was a great talk. I'm going to introduce our next Mike. Mike Thomas is a CEO of Appian Partners. He's a managing partner at Bold Brain Capital, an AI-focused venture capital firm investing in digital health startups in imaging markets, and a senior commercialization advisor for DARPA's Embedded Entrepreneur Initiative. Is a former serial healthcare technology CEO and founding architect of ARPA-H's commercialization strategy. He has raised $125 million, delivered returns up to 80 times, and led companies through IPOs, acquisitions, and market capitalizations from $4 million to $250 billion. So we're really delighted to listen to what he has to say. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. Good evening. Thanks for having me here. When I first got the invitation to do this presentation, the feedback was, I asked, well, what do I want to talk about? Who wants to hear what I have to say? And so the feedback was, well, tell us about the war stories. Tell us about what life is like in the trenches, and give us a sense of, not just from a venture capital investor perspective or from a CEO, just tell us what life is really like in the real world. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories, but basically, one of the things that I've learned as a multi-time CEO is that there are just an enormous amount of smart people on this planet. So getting a patent issued is great. It's a wonderful feat, great accomplishment. But guess what? There are hundreds, thousands of other people, millions around the world that are doing really incredible things, either getting patents or not, and figuring out other ways to solve problems in ways that you may not have ever thought of before. So what's somebody to do? So one of the things is thinking about business model innovation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about business model innovation as a concept or a thought process in terms of how one views your invention, views what you did, that what you have created and received a patent for, or hoping to receive a patent for, and thinking about maybe a new way of going and approaching the market. So what do these innovations do for you? Sometimes when you have an incredible patent, incredible innovation, it allows you to be really creative in terms of how you're going to go to the market. So don't always think about, hey, the market's this way, I have to deal with it that way. Many times that's the right way to go, but sometimes it's not. And oftentimes some of the greatest inventions allow you to be really, really creative. Now, being creative is a kind of a hidden keyword for in venture capital, a lot more risk. So it's a lot less risky in many ways to deal with what you know and to try to out-execute or out-hustle your competition, other companies, other inventions. When you're dealing with things that are new, that means more execution risk. And that tends to be a little scarier from an investor perspective. Okay, so there's a lot more art to trying to figure out how do you take the science and deliver it to the marketplace in a way that's unique. Mike did a fantastic job, and I'm not going to kind of go over any of those details. He did an awesome job really of just explaining some of the things you really have to think about and consider in terms of voice of the customer research, talk to your customers. But I will say one thing that we definitely look for as investors in our startups is that we're looking for folks who have an obsessive focus on delivering exceptional experiences. It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a combination. But you really want, at the end of the day, someone, your clients, your customers, to say to you, I can't imagine my life without this. And that's a pretty lofty, pretty visionary place to be. Not very few actually get there, but I'm sure a lot of us in this room can think about a couple experiences or a couple examples or products or services where you think, yeah, I can't get through my day without this. So that's kind of the lofty goal that you want to be thinking about when you're trying to deliver a solution to somebody who's willing to pay a good enough price that you can make a good profit on it. So there are a couple of things, and again, I think Mike touched a lot on this, but I'll just put it into 3 buckets. So when you have an invention, your incredible journey, torturous journey, to try to figure out, can you make this thing, this wonderful invention, this great patent, into a product, into a company, into a solution that somebody's willing to pay a good enough amount for, that you have viability as a company, you first and foremost have to think about leadership, company, people, right? So I know Mike talked a good bit about this, but I will tell you the first thing we look at before we make an investment is the founder, the CEO, the management team, the board of directors, if you have one, the advisors, the scientific advisors, the business advisors. are these people that we can work with? Are these folks that really have, at the end of the day, really have a sense of modesty, a certain level of humbleness, and a high level of EQ to understand, yeah, you might be smart, but you also have to realize that, just like a sports analogy, and we use sports analogies all the time in our business discussions, you got to know what the score is. You might feel like you're playing well, but if that score is showing that you're not winning the game, you need to be smart enough and humble enough to pivot. Be honest with yourself. And investors love that. Why do they love that? Because building a business and taking an innovation to the marketplace is difficult. It's not easy. But what's more impressive is this: if you feel like, hey, guess what? We should be doing better, or we're not doing well, figure that out soon and then pivot. And then if you have the EQ and the humbleness and the modesty to be able to figure that, and your team has that, wow, you can have what we call B-level teams create A-level returns for investors versus folks who are extremely well pedigreed, and you think, oh my God, my head's going to explode if I have another conversation with these people. So, you really want to be able to make sure that you develop a corporate culture, a company culture, that you can find and attract the absolute best talent that you can. Your job as a founder, CEO, a management team, board, or investor is to remove those obstacles so that they can achieve greatness. So that's one thing. Next thing is the market. Obviously, is it big? Is it growing? As an investor, you really want to say, hey, rising tide lifts all ships. So it's really nice when you have a big market. You can still succeed, though, in a small market. Just know how precise your execution needs to be. You need to really know your market very well. So you don't always necessarily have to have a massive market. Investors like to have big markets that are growing rapidly. But in order to be a successful company and to be a good investment for your investors, sometimes you can have small markets as well. And then, of course, capital. Everybody needs money, right? That's why we exist. People ask me the differences between being a CEO and being an investor. I would tell you the torture of being a CEO is that when you go through this incredible, torturous journey of raising money, you dust yourself off, feel really good that you closed the funding round. You start the next day getting ready for your next fundraise, and you haven't even executed on the milestones that were basically paid to raise the money and execute on. So it's a constant process, and you have to be incredibly astute managers of risk, of cash burn, of finances, of talent, of execution. There's a lot that's going on. So just be aware that capital is an important part of it, but it is third on the list. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the stories, and I know I only have about 20 minutes, and I could probably spend about 35 years telling you about these stories. So the first one is going to be about a company. I was contacted by a recruiter through LinkedIn about 15 years ago. Gosh, I'm losing track of time. They said, hey, we got this interesting company, but they're in trouble. And it's really kind of neat. It was a company that was founded by an emergency room physician in Haifa, Israel. They were publicly traded in Australia on the Australian Stock Exchange. U.S. operations were in Southern California. Manufacturing was in China. And I thought, okay, 4 continents for a startup. What could be harder? Well, I found out on the first day that I ended up accepting the position and joining. We had our first all-hands management team meeting. The company only had 3 months of cash left. Typically on a public company, you're in wind down stage. At that point, you're just like, okay, thank you. Let's just wind this thing down. So we had to figure out, oh my gosh, how do I raise some money and then reduce the cash burn, understand the core technology. And the core technology was the physician, he did a lot of work with neural networks, and he was trying to figure out, okay, I can detect crackles and wheeze, different kinds of lung sounds before the human ear, before a doc can hear it. So I'm going to replace spirometry as the reference standard for diagnosing asthma. Problem number 1. Doctors actually don't use spirometry for the most part. Most doctors around this planet use their ear and a stethoscope. And then they say, oh, guess what? If you have asthma, if I hear wheezing, I'm going to give you albuterol. So short-acting beta-2 agonists and say, do you feel better? You got asthma. So, okay, well, that's not going to work, right? Nobody uses this reference standard. This thing is, and the company burned through $60 million. I was the 5th CEO, I think, or somewhere along there, to come in, 3 months of cash left. So we had to do a strategy pivot. We had to figure out a different business model that would be attractive to investors, that would actually work. And we had to do voice of the customer research on 4 different continents. We had to try to figure out how do we do all this, running out of money, and try to raise some money. So Short story is, raised $1 million in 90 days, then was able to raise $25 million, and we took the market cap of the company from $4 million to almost $250 million in less than 3 years. And we did that by doing a strategy pivot. In our voice of the customer research, we found that the folks that are most anxious about asthma are moms who have kids who are wheezing. And we found that marital discord was actually a primary driver. There are a lot of arguments between mom and dad about whether Junior should be going to the ER or not. So we found that, okay, well, this is interesting. And this was back in the day when, iPhone came out in 2007. It was 2011. Smartphones were still just in its infancy. The App Store was there, and there was the old saying, well, there's an app for that. But not everybody really was fully on board with kind of the app environment, smartphone. So it wasn't, there's BlackBerry still existed. So, that tells you what the time of history we were in. And so what we found was that if we could develop a direct-to-consumer device that enabled moms to monitor their children, they would be willing to pay several $100s for the device and anywhere from $10 to $40 a month subscription, which, by the way, didn't exist back then. Nobody charged monthly subscriptions for apps or digital health services back then. It was, I think, I can't even remember if Netflix was still doing the DVDs through the mail thing, but this was a different time back then. So we thought, okay, this was an innovative business model we think could really work. So, but we had to also do one other thing. We had to get the FDA to agree that a direct-to-consumer device that could detect wheezing sound before the human ear or a doc with a stethoscope is okay to go direct-to-consumer. FDA is not particularly fond of those kinds of RX to OTC things because that puts the risk on them, versus if it's prescription, the risk is on the doctor. So it took us a little while, but we did get it through the FDA, and we did have a good return to our investors. So that was one example. I could tell you all about I had a full head of hair, by the way before. So that gives you a sense of what the stress was like. Okay, we're story number 2. All right. This was my first CEO gig. So this was a company based in Palo Alto, founded in 1992. I joined in 2001, right after 9/11. Great time to be joining a company at that point. They burned through $28 million of venture capital funding. Johnson & Johnson was one of the major investors. A lot of big Silicon Valley names were behind it. I was the 6th CEO to come in. They got FDA clearance. It was a device that could diagnose obstructive sleep apnea in the home. And it was a self-administered technology. At that time, nothing really existed. You had to go to a sleep lab. Sleep apnea, by the way, is a disorder where you stop breathing for 10 seconds or more, hundreds of times throughout the night. And who would have thought that if you stop breathing, that's a bad thing? So all the organs in your body really get damaged. Most folks have it for 7 to 10 years before they get diagnosed. There was a really robust industry of sleep labs. So doctors were making, pulmonologists and sleep medicine physicians making millions of dollars. Sleep labs were making tens and tens of millions of dollars, diagnosing folks in a torturous process invented at Stanford 60 years ago. So the thought was, okay, well, we have this device. We could self-administer. They mail it, FedEx it to the patient. They self-administer. We have a neural network that uses noise cancellation technology, and it was the most accurate thing on the market for being able to figure out how to measure airflow and diagnose sleep apnea in the home at 1/10 the cost. So we thought, okay, innovative business model. We'll go direct to the home. We'll have a service model. Guess what? Sleep docs didn't like it. So Medicare said, hey, we're gonna give you a code. We're gonna give you some pricing. And we're gonna approve of in-home sleep testing. Sleep docs rallied against us. They got Medicare to issue a non-coverage determination. But what does that mean? That means that our customers no one's going to pay for it. So we have this great solution, but we can't get paid. So goal number 1 was to say, okay, let's change the rules. So the business model innovation first was device sent to the home, kind of a mail order type of telemedicine, have a service revenue model. And then all of a sudden we thought, okay, well, this isn't going to work because Medicare now just said no. And when Medicare says no, everybody says no. So then we said, all right, well, we're going to go after Medicare. We're going to convince them. So long story short, we spent several years trying to convince them, thought we really had it at the 11th hour. Medicare said no at this big coverage determination meeting. So that put us into a kind of DEFCON 4 mode, set us back a couple years, a couple more millions of dollars, and the investors were really starting to lose faith. So what did we have to do? We had to change again. So we said, you know what? We know our clinical evidence was solid enough. We're going to go directly to the insurance companies. And all the investors said, you're crazy. I think I might have had a little hair left. It was gone by then. So after we decided to go payer by payer to get reimbursement for our specific mail order in-home sleep apnea testing process, string together after a couple of years, we ended up with 4, 5, 6 dozen payers under contract, half of the United States in terms of insurance reimbursement we had under coverage. So now we had enough to go back to Medicare. Nothing had really changed. We simply had a better presence and built a bigger coalition. This time we won. We got Medicare to agree to change, to allow reimbursement. And lo and behold, we created a whole new industry. It exploded. It did really well. A lot less expensive. Insurance companies now liked us. Then they started shifting everything our way. Took the company from 0 to about 22, 24 million, something like that. But it took 8 years to get there. So business model innovations don't come easy. I don't know where I am on time, but I could probably talk a lot more about the trials and tribulations of doing this. But that's, in a nutshell, just some of the ideas in terms of how business model innovation works. So just a couple of points just to kind of leave you with. If you think investors, and Mike went through this, I think, in good detail. If you think investors are the right way to go, understand that they like the story and they like the growth stories. By the way, be a good storyteller. That's always a good way to be able to get folks to jump on board, listen to your story. Oh, the other thing is, I know I'm going to digress for a moment, and this is going to show you how old I am, right? Old cocktail party. If someone says, what do you do? Make sure that you say one sentence that they stop and pause and say, eyebrows raised, and they say, oh, really? Tell me more. What you don't want to do is start telling them about how your semiconductor chip can operate at room temperature, and trying to figure out, or you don't want to talk about your CRISPR biologic, and don't go into that stuff. Make sure that you understand how to communicate your story in a way that you get someone to say, oh, tell me more. That sounds interesting. And so if you can become a really adept storyteller, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to want to join your team, going to want to invest in you, and want to join your story because you're going to change the world somehow. Okay, so investors buy growth stories. I'm in healthcare, so without reimbursement, no one's paying for my stuff. So reimbursement, FDA has to approve you generally, and you need someone to pay in the United States. It's insurance companies and Medicare. We talked about the pivot. Pivot's important. Why is a pivot important? Because it's a direct reflection on you as the inventor, as the CEO, as the management team. Be humble, be modest. Don't be afraid to say you made a mistake. Don't own the strategy, own the results and the outcome. And then sometimes innovation means changing the system, not necessarily the tech. So here's where I kind of leave off. Whenever just looking at something initially, just does the thing work? And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, whether you're in healthcare, deep tech, whatever it might be. But then the second thing is, does it make a difference? So your thing might actually work. You might get a patent, you might get 10 patents, but does it actually make a difference? So Mike was talking about this too, which is really important, because if you're making something that is just marginally better than something else that's already in the marketplace, yeah, especially docs, they don't like to switch. Docs hate to switch. They like their thing because it's safe. They feel really comfortable with it. So make sure that your thing actually does make a difference. And then if it does make a difference, does anybody actually care about it? You're going to need advocates. You're going to need folks who actually believe in your story, believe in your passion, and can see what the end result of your vision of a new world looks like with your new invention. Find those people and bring them on board. Okay, I think I ran out of time. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a program I'm really excited to talk to you about at 4:20, which I'm a little bit over, and the NAI ambassador will talk. We have then Mike Fuerstman, then Mike Thomas. No questions and answers. We don't have time. Okay. We're going to do something interesting. We're going to lock the doors, right? And we're going to force you to interact in person with our speakers. Okay. So we'll have Mike Fuerstman stand on this side and Mike Thomas stand on that side. And you're going to divide in half and talk to your respective speaker for a few minutes. And then at 5:25, we're going to call time, and you're going to switch sides. Okay, so this is your time to interact, personal questions, things you might not be bold enough to ask in front of 133 people. There's some of us online. And at 5:35, Anne, our NAI ambassador, will hold office hours on a computer someplace, and so you can talk to her, and we'll continue our chapter networking. Okay, so why don't we begin? Randy will set the stage for Anne. I'll tell you a little bit about Anne. She brings over 35 years of experience in technology transfer. She's a certified licensing professional, longtime leader in AUTM. She's been recognized with the AUTM President's Award for her lasting contributions in the field. What is AUTM? Stands for Association of University Technology Managers. It's a nonprofit leader that educates, promotes, and inspires professionals to support development in academic research. And it's a community that comprises of more than 3,000 members who work in 800 universities, research centers, hospitals, businesses, and government-funded organizations around the globe. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Anne. Thanks for being with us.
Hi. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Now, I was going to share my screen. Did you want me to do that, or are you going to move the slides from over there?
You can absolutely try to share your screen.
Okay, let me do that. Wait 1 second. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, great.
Yes,
well,
we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so as Steve said, I'm Ann DiSante. I am recently retired from I want to call it the Technology Catalyst Office at Michigan State University. I was the executive director there, and I spent almost 40 years in academic tech transfer. Not going to talk to you at all about that right now. I'm going to be talking to you about the National Academy of Inventors and giving you an overview of NAI and some of the resources that NAI has. And I think an important thing for you as innovators to remember is this focuses on you as an inventor. And the impact that you can have. NAI supports you as an individual inventor. And there's one thing I want you to keep in mind as I talk about this, and this is just an important thing that I learned over my 40 years, is that AUTM is important. The metrics are there. Most of the offices report, but what metrics don't show is impact. So think about how to tell your stories. If you don't tell your stories, someone else will fill the silence. So work with the Center for Research Innovation, work with your departments to tell your stories. Oh dear. How come this didn't advance? All right. Okay. So as I mentioned, I am going to focus on the NAI resources and just, let you know that this is going to be what I'm going to be doing right now, not anything related to actual tech transfer. Oh, man. Sorry, I'm having troubles advancing this. Oh, there it goes. Great. So NAI has over the years has partnered with the Patent Office, and Patent Office, USPTO, which handles patents and trademarks, has a number of resources on its on its website, and luckily it is currently running using its reserves. So feel free to take a look at what's on the USPTO website, and it's good to know that that's still going. So Northeastern is an institutional member of NAI, and this is really important because the institutional membership does provide you as Northeastern faculty and students access to certain resources that just anybody else coming in won't be able to get a hold of. So the institutional membership does allow NAI to make these resources available. And I would encourage you as innovators to validate your institution's commitment to NAI by being active in your chapter. So this is hard. What you do is hard. And I have never been a faculty member. I am not an inventor, but I've worked with hundreds at 4 different institutions throughout my career. And I don't think anybody has ever told me what you do is easy. So NAI recognizes the effort and the work that you put into innovation. So the first program is the Fellows Program, and I did look this morning, and you had 12 individuals from Northeastern who were listed as NAI Fellows. These are individuals who are at a sort of the really high level pinnacle of their career. They have made significant impact on society with their innovations and licensing and putting your technologies into the hands of the public. And so there is, at the annual meeting, there is a event and an acknowledgement of the fellows. So congratulations to the fellows from your institution for being recognized for the work that you've done. I find this graphic quite interesting. It really shows you what the impact that the NAI fellows have had over the years. I mean, when you look at over 20,000 licensed technologies, these are technologies which have been given a chance. They're kicking the tires. What will this technology do to impact society? So an amazing amount of technologies. Students, and look at the number of students who are involved. You are really supporting the next generation of innovators through your work in academia and working with the grad students and postdocs, which I know aren't students, but on your innovations and really getting them involved and having them starting to see the impact that innovation can have throughout their careers. Startups in Boston area, you have, I don't have to tell you about startups. In other areas, it's not, they're not some of the struggles there are struggles that other areas face with creating the startups. But boy, those startups can have a huge impact on economic development. So the website has information on the requirements for nominations. The next window for nominations are going to open in mid-2026. So the senior member program, again, I think I saw 3 on the website today, 3 faculty who are senior members, and they are really entering and are in the earlier part of your innovative career in academia. And though they have produced technologies that have impacted the public. So I think one of the most important things for me when I was working on senior member applications when I was at Michigan State was the important part of educating and mentoring the next generation of innovators, and how important that was in the application. And so, when you look at these numbers here, you can see that but here it says over 24% of the patents held by senior members have been licensed, again, giving those technologies a chance to, be vetted for actual impact. So right now, NAI is accepting nominations for the senior member program through December of this year. So the chapter program, of which which you are a part of, is a great way to network internally within your institution, and to celebrate your inventors. And so, one thing that, as I was looking at this and thinking of the chapters, and a number of universities are developing and creating inventor ambassador programs within different departments, and having somebody designated by, let's say, the Center for Research Innovation as an invention ambassador. And I think if you take your participation in the chapter program and look at who's interested there, you sort of have a early stage ambassador program where those of you who are members and who are involved can advocate for innovation and participation with the Center for Research Innovation within your own departments. And I know I'm going fast. So anyway, NAI decided just recently to do a chapter of excellence award, and the Tufts received it in 2025. I think this reflects the investment of time that is made in order to sustain, to grow and sustain a chapter. It's, it just doesn't happen overnight, and it does take effort. So in June of next year will be the 15th NAI annual conference, and the induction ceremonies are there. The Chapter of Excellence Award is given there. It brings faculty and innovators together to discuss best practices. So if you're interested, you can go on the NAI website and you can sign up to be notified when registration goes live for 2026. So it was interesting to me. I attended the 2019 annual conference, and it was very interesting for me because the speakers were talking from the innovator's point of view. And when I would go to many of the autumn presentations and meetings, we're talking from the tech transfer point of view. And so hearing from innovators, again, across the board who've been recruited to present at this conference was really quite interesting for me. And I would, encourage you to consider attending. So one thing that happens at the annual meeting is the student showcase. And so I think this is the opportunity to plant the seeds of the potential of innovation in innovators, from young innovators, not just your students, your undergraduate students at the university, but also K through 12. And so there are 3 prizes that are awarded there, 3 different groups based on I think it's K through 8, 9 through 12, and then for the university inventors, the team has to have an undergraduate who is part of the team, and they do the presentation. So very early stage exposure of inventors to groups that can help and ask questions and get them thinking about what they are doing. So this is a real great opportunity to support students from across the board. So NAI has a number of educational programs and opportunities, and really think you need, because you your university is an institutional member, as individuals there, you can take advantage of all of these. So GAIN, the Global Academic Inventors Network, really started as a mentorship program, but is now evolving to where you can get advice and give advice. And so it is really developing peer networking opportunities, communities together who can support each other, individuals supporting each other in this in your invention efforts. So there's also an IP curriculum and certification program, and you can utilize this in courses. If you complete this, there are, let's see, what do they say? 12 video modules and 38 lessons with the final exam. You pass the final exam, you get this certificate. You can use it in your classroom, and so you can reach out to NAI and talk with them about the opportunities for this certification program. So both GAIN and the IP curriculum and certification programs have been developed by NAI in partnership with the US PTO. So here, the video and webinar resources is another great opportunity to tell your stories. So Scholar Share webinars are hosted by thought leaders and talking about their experiences. Right now, there are 18 webinars available through NAI on the Scholar Share. The Campus to Commerce video series is showcasing the member institutions, and there are let's see, I had a number here. I thought there were like 12, I think, of Campus to Commerce videos out there, and the ones that I've looked at have talk about a very specific technology, but it's focused on the institution and what that institution has supported. So again, keeping in mind, telling your stories and having the opportunity to do it in a webinar is, you always want to give a number of people the ability to look at and learn how they like to learn. The Ambassador Program. Hello, that's me. We are here to help support NAI and talk about what NAI can do for you. So on the website at NAI's website, under the newsroom is the Invention Insider. And this Invention Insider does focus on some of the underrepresented inventor communities, and has both, I said, written and video content. It's also supported by the USPTO and is really there to help and provide information on inventors from all backgrounds and communities. And this is took a little bit for me to find it. It is under the newsroom part of on the NAI website. So the journal, Technology and Innovation, it's a primary go-to for innovation in the academic environment. The next issue is coming out approximately at the end of November. And so keep your eyes out for that. Finally, last thing I'm going to highlight are the publications, the rankings that are done. And I think how NAI has put these together is very helpful for those, for those of us in academic tech transfer, academic catalyzing that technology. And they're focusing on US patents, but looking at both worldwide universities, and then there is the top 100 US universities, as well as the nonprofit research institutes and government agencies. And so you could, all of those are on the website. I know they are a great PR opportunity when they come out, and I would encourage you to, take a look at those. So that's all I have to say. I don't know if I did. I hope I did this in 15 minutes or less. But thank you. The website for NAI is academyofinventors.org. And there is just a boatload of information on there that will really help you as individual inventors. Please keep in mind that NAI does not substitute for working with the Center for Research Innovation. And I have to, as a former tech transfer person, I have to really support and encourage you that that's your primary go-to for handling your Northeastern innovations and working closely with those professionals. They're well-versed in all the angles of technology commercialization, and you can use the NAI work to help support your interactions with them.